Where does God show up in our life? You know, on one of the interviews I was on, I believe it was the Jeff Mara interview, maybe. Um, I told the story of being an altar boy, and I'll tell the story again here because many of you may not have heard it. But as many of you know, I grew up as a Catholic, and my mother was she lived at the church. She was head of liturgical doctrine. She was the organist. She was the choir director. She was at church 7 days a week. It was very, very rare for her to get a day off. And I was an altar boy. My brother was a reader. And one Sunday morning, I woke up late for Mass. Now, Mom was already down there because she was playing organ for the earlier Mass. But I was running late. So I woke up. I ran upstairs. I was very, very upset because I was so late. And I wolfed down a bowl of Cheerios, and I went out back, and I grabbed my bike, and I threw it over the back fence and climbed over, and because that was the fastest way to get to the church, was the back way. And I rode my bike fast and hard as I could, you know, the 5 miles down to where the church was. And I got down there, and I came in the back of the sacristy, and the priest gave me the disapproving glance over his glasses, right? I ran in, and I very quickly prepared the altar for the service, because that was my job. And then we went out and we did the actual Mass. Well, there I was standing on the altar underneath those hot lights, and my Cheerios started to rebel. My stomach started churning. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt terrible. While I was standing there, feeling sick, a woman in the front pew got up and went over to my brother, who was sitting there, and said, "That young boy doesn't look well." And my brother looked and didn't say anything, didn't know what to do because he's on the altar, and he's like, he didn't know what to do. And my Cheerios kept rebelling. Finally, I knew I was going to vomit. And so I took my hands and I put it in front of me like that. Like I caught my my breakfast. Now here I was standing on the altar with a handful of Cheerios, and I ended up backing through the door into the sacristy, going outside and continuing evacuating my breakfast into the bushes. Meanwhile, while I was outside doing that, the priest finished his sermon, and my brother, during the quiet moment, went to the priest, who was my mother's best friend. We knew him because of his weekly visits to our house, and my brother leaned over to the priest and he said, "John threw up." And the priest said, "Where?" And my brother said, "In his hands." And the priest said, "Good." I'm leaving that moment of pregnant silence there, that pregnant pause, because I want you to think about that. I want you to think about where God was in that moment, right? My brother and the priest were obeying Christian belief. We're not going to mark up the altar. We're not going to, they didn't have a loving response. But God showed up that day. God showed up that day in the form of that woman going to my brother and saying, "That young boy doesn't look well." She was the one who brought love into this equation. It wasn't the priest, it wasn't my brother. And I don't blame either one of them, because that's the way they were trained. They were literally trained to think that way. Can't blame them for that. But love showed up that day in the form of that woman who, during the sermon, went to my brother. At the time where you're supposed to be paying attention to the priest, she was loving enough to say, "That young boy doesn't look well." In our lives, we have people who we endow with our belief of love. They are a representation of love to us. Sometimes it's the parent. They represent love or unconditional love. At least they're supposed to. Many often don't. If you're a parent, oftentimes it's your children that are supposed to represent the unconditional love for you. Over the past couple of days, I've had a couple of different people ask me about their relationships with their children after they've left home. Now, in one case, the children left home and they still had a great relationship, but the house was empty, and now that unconditional love that was represented there was no longer there. But she also had lost purpose in the fact that she had nothing to give her unconditional love to, because as a parent, she was not giving it to herself. She was giving it to the family. That family came first. So she felt a huge void because the kids were no longer there, because she lost purpose. So she lost the ability to give that unconditional love. She also lost the ability to be of service, which was the only way she gave herself unconditional love, was by defining herself as a person of service. Another person contacted me because, according to the email, she had a great relationship with her child until her child moved out, and then the child basically cut her off. A couple things that I would say in this situation is, number one, if your child cut you off after they left out, you have to actually assess whether that relationship was as good as you think it was anyway. Because if a child moves out and then doesn't come back, or cuts off relationships, it's because they're getting away from the situation. A lot of times mothers and fathers will be overbearing in trying to be overprotective and trying to be very much a shield from fear in the outside world. And then the child gets stifled and smothered. Other times, you have a domineering person in the household who this is the way things are, and you think they have a great relationship with their child, and then the child leaves and doesn't come back. And they're like, well, why? Well, because I have to now express who I am and not who you want me to be. And so there's a lot of nuance in that situation. But in both of those parental situations, it was about where these individuals, the parent or the child, are getting the love, right? That's our relationship to love in this world is why we're here. We're here to experience unconditional love fully. And if you are a parent who has big, high expectations for your child, that's your condition. That means the love isn't unconditional. If you are the parent who will not allow them to go out and have experiences to learn from, that is your condition. The love is not unconditional. I don't like when they do this, so blah, 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 right? And kids, when they leave the house, will go. They're supposed to go off and live their life, and they're supposed to go off and come to understand their own relationship with love. Parents and empty nesters, they oftentimes find themselves feeling a void because that thing that represents love to them, that represents that God source to them, is no longer in the equation. Okay, so you're afraid of not having their love, right? You're afraid that as they've left the house and they've cut off relationships with you, you're afraid of not having their love. The only way you resolve that situation really is just be love and not be expectation. That's a huge statement. Don't expect them to come back. Don't expect them to want to make amends. Don't expect them to do anything, because your expectations is like driving them away. I often tell people, I said, if you have two people, And if you see my hands, there's one person who's the other person. And one person is constantly going like this at somebody, right? This other person is going to step back, right? I'm constantly coming at him, constantly coming at him, constantly coming at him until finally this person's going to step back, right? But if you're constantly going at somebody, going at him, 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 and then you stop and you go away, then you go, hey, where are you going? And they come towards you. You have to pull back. You have to let them be what they are. You have to let them experience the void, the absence of your love or your expression. And if they've already cut you off so harshly and they're not talking to you at all, then all you can do is let them know. I respect your individuality. I respect your path in life. I love you no matter what. And if you ever want to talk, I will always be here. There is not anything you could do or I would not be here. Now, what is that? That is a statement of unconditional love without expectation. By giving them the love without expectation, you've literally said to them, this isn't conditional. I love you no matter what, no matter what. That is what they're looking for. They're looking for unconditional love, right? And if your kids have left the house and you have a fine relationship with your child still, and you're the ones feeling the void, it's because you've defined yourself as someone who is to serve and to get them through. But now it's time to go, okay, I've done a good job. I've raised good kids. I trust that they're going to do well in the world. And I am, now serving myself. I'm now giving myself love as well. Because, there's a transition in life. We raise our kids. And then over time, we grow old and our kids usually take care of us, right? So in the middle of this, raising them and taking care of us, there's a transition period in here where we have to figure out what this little transition is. And that transition really is a time for us to give ourselves the love that we deserve. Because as a parent, absolutely 100%, children have to come first, but not disproportionately to loving oneself. So that is my thought today about empty nesters and spirituality. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.